Hello, everybody, and welcome to the secret history living in your aquarium. Today, we're going to be talking about this fish, the blue ram, also known as the German blue ram, not the Bolivian ram. That is a different species, but very closely related. This is now called Mikrogeophagus ramirezi, and it's an interesting name with an interesting history. And as I just said, this is the secret history living in your aquarium, and I felt like it was time to do a video where we discuss some actual history. So let's get into it. If you like these history videos, please click a thumbs up, share it if you'd like with someone that it's helpful for, or you can visit my Patreon or my Teespring and check out some of my merchandise, or just help out the channel in other ways so that I can get new fish, new tanks, and new equipment to keep doing these kind of videos, and that's my plug for now. So, these fish are found, they are found in Venezuela, in the Orinoco Delta, and I'm just going to let them swim in and out of the frame, so sorry that I'm not going to give you guys a bunch of beautiful B-roll of millions of types of blue rams, or German blue rams, but that's just how it's going to be. It's going to be a natural setting, and as we see them, we'll discuss things. So, these fish were first discovered by Europeans and the Western world, as it may be called, and Asia and Africa. These were first discovered in 1948, first formally named. And they were named by a pair of Americans named Myers and Harry. And I know that sounds like that could just be one guy, Harry Myers. But Myers was actually an American ichthyologist in the 1920s and 30s, and he traveled the world. He discovered and named a ton of fish. Now, I'm sure the natives of the Orinoco Delta knew all about these fish for thousands of years. But as far as the outside world goes, they had only known about this fish for about 10 to 15 years before it got its official name in 1948. And that official name originally was going to be the Geophagus ramirezi or the Paplochromis ramirezi. And the reason it got those monikers was because the first guy to ship out the species was a local named Manuel Ramirez, and he had been shipping them to France and Berlin primarily, and fish keepers had started already selectively breeding them and keeping them, which is quite the feat because they actually need very warm water and very clean water. So today, that's something to keep note of, but in early fish keeping until the 1920s and 30s, that was really a pretty big accomplishment to keep the water between 78 and 86 degrees like they like it. Now, I want to show you something really quick, and that is that the female here, she's less decorated. She has a pink belly, and she doesn't have a big black spot on her side. But if she did, it would have the iridescent blue that you see on her side covering it, whereas the males do not have that. Now, also, her fins are more rectangular or boxy. They don't have long pectoral flares or little flails that come out. And if you count the first three rays of that dorsal fin, you can see that it's not as tall and not as pronounced or colorful as in the males, where it's usually jet black or blue. Now, these fish originally, evolutionarily, are related to a lot of other fish in the Amazon. Here's a male here. And they are not actually from the Amazon. They're from farther north in the Orinoco Delta Basin. And they share a lot of ancestors, as I was just saying. And we've learned more and more with DNA testing. But even before that, they had a feeling that other earth-eating fish, Geophagus is their official group name, which means geo, earth in Latin, and then phagus, to eat or with a mouth. And they got that name, and then Ramirez because of the guy who shipped them out. And they just knew them as Ramirez rams at first, or they were calling them rams, Ramirez cichlids. And then it's just custom to add an I, usually when you're giving a Latin name to a fish named after someone. But these fish, they have gone through a lot of name changes, and that's because they are so similar to a number of fish. They are, originally, it was a big debate between Manuel Ramirez, a man named Myers, and a man named Harry. They were two explorers, those are their last names, and they were from America, and they set off pre-World War II originally, and they went to all the colonial holdings post-World War I that were starting to be transferred out of colonial power. So Europe owned most of the world on paper and held lots of sway in these regions. And so naturalists and sociologists and anthropologists, they all took that time in history to go and try to meet the tribal people, to meet the indigenous animals, and to collect a lot of information on them. Well, then World War II happened and put a kink in plans. And some of the fish that were sent out before World War II were known as these Ramirez rams. And they, the ram cichlid, as it was known, was showing up in different countries, very different from the way it looked in other countries. So there was a Turkish variety, there was a French variety, there was a German variety, and during the war, fish keeping was actually a way that some people occupied their time, especially if they had some means, some money. And you can see here those three rays, well, you could. And these ones are a little more skittish because they are wild-caught rams. These are what the rams would look like in the wild. Right now, it's literally hanging out in the net, which probably the worst place it could have run to. But these fish are a type of apistogramma, that is. That is the belief of many fish enthusiasts, that is. And others say, no, they're clearly just geophagus. Well, it turns out they're both. They're related to both, and they've gone through this battle of naming. And this American explorer, Myers, also named, some fish you might have heard of, such as the neon tetra, the cardinal tetra, some angelfish variants, the Altum angelfish. He was on the expedition for that later on. He has a prolific life leading up until the mid-1980s, and he just was instrumental in naming fish. Now, the people of the region also went and found different variations of this cichlid, and some of them had bigger mouths, some of them had more red, more yellow, some of them had yellow faces, blue faces, no yellow, red showing, just all sorts of combinations. And so as these were shipped out during World War II and then later during the Cold War, a lot of people got their original pairs or breeding stock from a specific area in the Orinoco Delta, either in Colombia or Venezuela. Some people say that they found them in the Amazon as well, in Brazil, and that does not appear to be the case, but people are still arguing about that if they're in any of the tributaries of the actual Amazon River. However, they are in a multitude of places, and because of that, they have that multitude of phenotypes or genetic expressions of their body types, and because of this, some got yellowish faces, and these traits were noticed and picked out and selected for. So you have everything now from long-tailed, as we'd call veil tail or lyre. Some people say leer, but they're wrong. Lyre tail, just like we do in angelfish. These traits were bred out, And it wasn't until that 1948 secondary excursion back into the Orinoco Delta, which is almost like savanna lands. It's a strong heat, anywhere from 76 to all the way up to somewhere in the 85 to even 90-degree range is not unheard of for that region. Other fish that you find there, plecos. Oh, it's time to go to bed. Let me wake them back up. Other fish that you would find there are, plecos, a wide variety of corydoras, many tetras, and it's just a really biodiverse area underwater. Even when on land, it isn't sometimes. It's more of a grassy savanna in the uplands, and then near the water, it's more of a traditional jungle style environment. So they are used to tannins in the water and acidic water, so you want to be keeping them at a pH somewhere between 5 and 7, most people will say. And they need very crystal clear water. They want a TDS or dissolved solids amount that is basically rainwater. They can have some silt or sediment in the water, but they really want clear water that's oxygenated, or they tend to get sick, especially these different color variants that, like I was saying, as the lights blacked out, we have long tails, short tails, we have albinos, we have black rams that are a stark black color. I mean, you name it, and there is probably a ram variant that expresses some of those features if they were prevalent in the original fish. I'm trying to get them to come back into our view a bit, but I don't know where they went off to in this tank, so I'll just keep talking. All right, so back to the history side of things while they're hiding. Later on, they were given the name Papiliochromis ramirezi. And so throughout all this, you'll notice that the name Ramirez and then the I, which, we do that in Latin just to make it a name, a person's name into an animal name. So we said Manuel Ramirezi. So it's a Ramirezi cichlid. Ram is shortened. I hope you get that. Blue is the color variant that is closest to the wild, but there's also now electric blue that came out in 2008. In the 80s, we had gold, we had, albino, like I said. So lots of different versions. And now genetically, we're learning that all apistogrammas and all earth eaters probably had a shared ancestor. And some people believe that it's as recent as the last ice age. So talking 12 to 15,000 years ago, and that they split off and they were divided, and that they changed body types. These cichlids became more stout and small and specialized. And what they do is the name earth eaters, they live in silty or sandy bottom locations in clean water, and they eat these microcrustaceans that live in the sand and silt. However, you can easily train them to eat things like daphnia, brine shrimp, worms, black worms, white worms, Walther worms, whatever it may be, all the way up to frozen food and flake food later on. Now, they reproduce at a pretty extraordinary rate. They can have up to 500 eggs in a clutch. Usually it's more like 100 to 300. And the female, as you saw with that pink belly, she will fill that belly up and she will lay her eggs after she has imprinted on a boy of her choosing, a male ram of her choosing, and they will mate for life as long as the two of them are together. They are lifelong partners, and I think that's pretty cool. Now, when they have their babies, they'll usually lay them on a flat stone or surface. The other day, mine laid eggs on the glass right before they ate them, which is a problem with all cichlids in that they eat their young often in their first few tries. It's just a thing that happens, and they get it eventually. Same as this pleco. This lemon pleco has some babies in there. It took him a few tries to learn how to raise the babies. But they will raise those eggs, they'll protect them, they'll fan them with water so mold and fungus doesn't grow on them, and then they will basically school them around the tank. They will just let them go wherever they want, and they'll kind of herd them. Mom and dad will kind of follow them, and the father will actually protect the eggs before they hatch for the most time. Now, other than the water temperature and the clarity, you're going to want water that moves somewhere between 3 and 5 times the tank volume. An hour would be ideal to simulate a river. Here we have that nice male again. And he's got that longer body. It looks like pink on his tail, but it's kind of a fluorescent orange, actually. And he's got that black spot. But there are some blue dots on that black spot. And if he were like most rams, that would probably indicate that he were female, that it was a female ram. However, he's got that elongated body and those dorsal spikes that are really tall and spiky back tail tips. So we're going to assume that's a male at this age. Now, he could grow into it or out of it, I should say, and be a little different, like this plain Jane up here that we saw already. Sorry, she's behind these leaves. But she doesn't even have a black dot on her side. And this is just the state of things when you catch them out of the wild, when they're wild caught. And a lot of times they're less expensive when they're wild caught, if they're just the plain old normal blue ram. But throughout their history, as I said, they've been selectively bred. And now with all these color types, some of them can fetch hundreds of dollars, for the black ones or the long tail black ones, for purple ones. There's all sorts of different types. And they fetch a good amount of money. And every 10 years or so, thus far in their history, somebody has come out with something fascinating and new about them. Same with cribs and apistogramma cichlids. These are very similar to like the cockatoides, the orange flash cichlids, the apistogramma. And, just in general, they are little hunters that kind of scavenge, and they also are omnivores. But they're a really great fish, even if you're new to the hobby. You just want to make sure you keep the tank clean. If you're new, I wouldn't put so many fish like I have in your tank. All the plants help. They love planted tanks, and it's kind of a must-have for them, as well as that clean water and a good rate of flow. So, what else do I have to say about these fish? Well, the name, they couldn't just stop at Papiliochromis ramirezi. In the 1960s, they were arguing that they should be called something else about their bellies or something else about the spot on their side. So a bunch of people threw out different ideas, and eventually a Swedish magazine threw out the idea of Mikrogeophagus with a K, M-I-K, micro, in the more Scandinavian or Cyrillic Russian pronunciation style of micro. And that seemed to stick. They threw that out there for a long time. It overtook the Papiliochromis, and it overtook the name given by Hans Fry of Apistogramma ramirezi, and it overtook the Geophagus that did not have micro in front of it name. So they have been named many things, and if you search for any of those, you will probably find some variation of it. Now, lastly, I just want to say that the area they come from now is an area that needs to be under, great care and conservation. The forests are being slashed and burned, as are the scrublands and the savannas where they live, similar to kind of Pantanal-like settings. And people are also planting, palm oil trees. They're planting, they're cutting trees down for lumber, causing more silt in the water. There's not enough leaves and shade in the water then, And these little creeks and things where they usually spawn actually get like 110 degrees and they can't take that heat. Either that or they evaporate and then they can't live, period, because they don't breathe air, right, guys? So they're a really fascinating fish with kind of a delicate history and definitely a lot of different names throughout history and a lot of different cultures that have been fascinated with them since the early 1930s when they were first exported as a hobby fish. So as technology has grown, they've become more and more inbred, and people have been able to keep them easier and easier. And since they have so many babies, it's easy to select what you want out of a ram much quicker than a lot of species that only have a few babies at a time. So instead of having a choice of 20 fish, you have a choice of 500 fish with traits that you're looking for if you're trying to get a fish that's more blue or a fish that's more yellow. And that's allowed these fish to vary quite a bit, as well as the history of the Cold War, which kept all the German, East German and West German rams were kept separate, basically. And so places like the Czech Republic later on, Poland, and Russia proper, the Ukraine, they all kept these beautiful fish, and a lot of them just over time either genetically drifted and became known as the German rams because that's where they were exported out of usually, if not caught in the wild later on. They had the most blue on them coming out of Germany. And, you know, now they have so many different color variants that they've really limited that gene pool to get those traits. And so they may have thousands and thousands of fry and end up picking one from each of the few thousand fry that have yellow, and then breeding back those babies with the adults again and over. They don't live very long. They only live 2 or 3 years in most cases. So that is somewhat limiting. But because of all this, they are a fragile fish when they have the various color morphs. The black ones, for instance, don't seem to reproduce all that much. They seem to have small batches or they're infertile. The gold ones and the blue ones are probably your best bet. The electric blue, however, are a little bit less fertile. The long veil tails are a little less fertile, and they just have more health problems. They're very prone to ick as well as dropsy and other diseases like that. So I hope you enjoyed this little tour and this little discussion over how they got the name, the parts of their name, and why there are so many frickin' names for them. Soon we should be covering Apistogramma, and we've already covered cribs. If you want to look at more species from the Orinoco Delta, there are some in here. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but a hint is that one of the Cory species is from Venezuela and the other is from Colombia. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think with your like, with your subscription, and we are about at 10,000 subscribers now. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I really can't thank you enough for being such a great community of fish nerds, fish fam, and just honestly my friends. So thank you, and have a great night. I'll talk to you next time. Take care of yourself, your fish, and the people around you. You got to make sure you do that first one so you can do the other two. And if everybody did that, we would have a world so much nicer to live in. All right, guys, I guess the angelfish want to say goodbye, so maybe we'll do a special on them next. But say goodbye to the rams, and I'm sure I'll be showing you how to breed them, as well as more information and trivia on them coming soon. We'll talk to you later. This is Alex Williamson with The Secret History, living in my aquarium. Good night, guys.